Effective warfare requires discipline, obedience, decisiveness, action, secrecy. But democracy needs openness, reasonable discussion, compromise, time.
One section, prepare to assault! C-team, you're to get him! Moving into individual, let's go! Yeah!
And those slow, patient methods of democracy can drive a good soldier nuts when the nation's under fire. Most soldiers I've met don't trust politics and politicians. And so in this episode, we're going to test one of the great criticisms of democracy, that it's no way to fight a war. It's too soft. And that when the bombs start going off, it's time to turn things over to the generals.
I wasn't surprised to discover that in Argentina, the great heroes are military men. Argentines have admired and respected their military since 1816, when their soldiers won the country's independence from Spain. What I had not realized was that in the last 100 years, these heroes have fought only one war with a foreign power, and that was a humiliating defeat at the hands of the British in the Falklands in 1982. They're being taught that they're the protectors of the homeland. Their enemies are within. It's always been their duty to take control and pick up the pieces when democracy falls apart, as it almost always has in this ambitious and divided country. At the National Military Academy, they study politics, psychology, sociology. Character comes first, they learn. I sat in class and watched as they studied philosophy, Western Christian values, and that their highest, their most sacred duty is the survival of the nation. The population are the children. They are the adults.
Military intervention has been so commonplace that many Argentines have come to think of the armed forces as a normal alternative form of government. Over the last half-century, only one elected president has managed to complete a term in office. And he was a military man who came to power after yet another military coup.
In Buenos Aires, 1 million Argentines line the streets as Juan Perón reviews the Argentine Army and Navy.
Perón would be re-elected and then overthrown and then come back, only to die in office and leave the reins in the hands of his widow. In 1976, under Isabel Perón's desperately incompetent government, terrorism was exploding and the economy was wrecked. The army threw Isabel out. 3 senior officers took over the government, promising bread and security. They said it was a heroic crusade by the defenders of Western Christian values against the forces of darkness. All methods were acceptable if they won the war. A member of that government was General Villarreal, now a banker.
No puede pensarse exclusivamente en términos de que el subversivo era un combatiente abstracto. El subversivo podía ser un abogado, podía ser un médico, podía ser un periodista. Cada uno podía cumplir un rol determinado en esta estructura.
I would expect that from a general. There were also civilians who shared the same view and welcomed the Army's role. Schoolteacher Valerie Pels is one. Her wealthy father had been kidnapped by terrorists.
At that time, everybody was delighted to have the militaries, although they don't say it now. They were delighted. We were all wanting the militaries in the government. We needed help. We needed to be protected. It was bad. It wasn't good. But it was war.
But you're telling me that it's better to have a military regime than it is to have democracy.
I'm not telling you that.
But then you said
yeah,
democracy.
But what I'm trying to tell you, what I want to make a point on is that everybody talks only about the militaries making a bad thing. I mean, having all the blame, correct? And this was war. You've got to start when you've got a war. You've got victims on both sides. All right. There were many innocents who disappeared, correct? But how many innocents from the other side disappeared or were killed or had to suffer for kidnapping or leaving the country for that matter?
Today, Argentines can see feature films portraying La Guerra Sala, the dirty war. The military brutally turned on anyone who ventured to question their view of the nation's destiny. As the headless corpses started to wash up on the banks of the River Plata and the mass graves were discovered, a new word entered the language, desaparecido, the missing ones. Estimates range between 9 and 30,000 missing.
¡Apunten! ¡No me maten, no me maten! ¡Viva la patria! ¡Viva Montoneo! ¡Carajo! ¡Fuego! Amigos míos, esta vez nos habéis salvado. Y a vos, hijo de puta, no te van a quedar ganas de gritar.
No one in Argentina dared speak openly about the desaparecido, except the one group in this Catholic country even the military had to respect. They called themselves the Mothers of the Plaza de Mayo. Each Thursday afternoon, towards 3 o'clock, they gathered in front of the presidential palace. They donned the white headscarves embroidered with the names of their missing children. They pinned on photos of the voiceless ones, and in silence, they circled beneath the office windows of the military junta. Watching them, I thought, the dirty war is over now. The discredited generals brought down by their humiliating failure in the Falklands. The mothers have an elected president in the palace. Why do they still come here? And the answer is, they don't have their answers yet. Where are our children? Where is justice? Renee Eppelbaum is one of the mothers. One day in 1976, her son Luis did not turn up for a rendezvous. Soon she began to fear for the lives of her two other children, Lilia and Claudio.
My kids were not involved in anything criminal. They were not terrorists. Some of my friends, thinking that they thought that my children might be in danger staying in Buenos Aires. So they advised me to send them away, to send them abroad. Less than 3 months after, they were kidnapped too. So I had a witness who saw them in the concentration camp. And my children told him the way they had been taken to Buenos Aires, from Uruguay to Buenos Aires. They had been, tied with ropes on the floor of a plane. I assume that it must have been a military plane. Well, even for me, it's very painful. If my daughter has been thrown to the sea, not only who gave the order is a criminal, those who perform the order, who obey that order, are criminals too. They knew they were committing a crime.
And for those crimes, the generals were put on trial. Several went to jail. It was the first time that a Latin American country had taken its military to court. A bold, radical, democratic move. But while the mothers of the desaparecidos say that was not nearly enough, too many murderers are still free, the military remained defiantly convinced that no civilian court had the right to try them in the first place.
General Villarreal, do you not have a weight on your conscience because you were a member of a government that has the blood of innocent people on its hands?
Nosotros como integrantes del gobierno militar podemos tener sobre nuestra conciencia el peso de que se derramó sangre argentina. Pero también tenemos en nuestra conciencia la convicción de que no teníamos otra alternativa en el momento en que se adoptó la decisión de combatir a la subversión, porque el país no tenía otra alternativa si quería seguir viviendo en democracia, si quería ser realmente una república democrática.
That's the balcony from which they've announced every new turn in the old Argentine merry-go-round. And each new president or general who stood up on that balcony to announce the new age promised the people jobs and security, and the crowds cheered and went away satisfied. But soon after he was elected in December 1983, a president stood up on that balcony and told the people of Argentina that if democracy was going to survive in this country, they would have to tighten their belts and make some sacrifices. And the crowds booed and went away dismayed.
Slowly, trying to pull the country together with an appeal to a sense of national unity that his people have never felt, President Raúl Alfonsín and his supporters are trying to prepare the day for a change of government that does not require, as it almost always has in the past, the intervention of their country's heroes. In Argentina, there's always an excuse for democracy's failure, a cushion. The heroes are always standing by to take up their sacred duty to the nation. 1958, Algeria. France's professional soldiers were fighting against determined Arab independence guerrillas. Constitutionally, Algeria was part of France. But the soldiers began to feel that they had a clearer mandate from the French-Algerian settlers than the elected government in Paris had. That democratic government had lost them Indochina, and the soldiers were not about to let Algeria go too.
The French government in Paris was not showing any capacity to decide what to do with the Algerian crisis.
Reporter Alain Raymond was in Algiers for Agence France Presse, Europe #1. In the spring of 1958, He covered a demonstration where the leaders of the Foreign Legion and the paratroops declared that they wanted the World War II commander, General Charles de Gaulle, to come out of retirement and take over the government of France again. They would have to force the issue.
At the end of May 1958, a military airfield on the outskirts of Paris was to be the scene of the greatest threat to French democracy since the end of World War II. 5,000 French paratroopers from Algeria were going to drop out of the skies and take over the city in a bid to force the return to political power of the beloved General de Gaulle. The operation had the code name Resurrection. De Gaulle had refused to ally himself with the military plans, but he hadn't condemned them either, even when the generals took over Corsica.
And so there began a desperate race to head them off by finding constitutional means to bring de Gaulle back to power. And they did. The Prime Minister resigned, and the National Assembly reluctantly voted de Gaulle in almost as a dictator. He had unlimited powers for the first 6 months.
And so once again, the general took over the country, and France stepped back from the brink of civil war.
A few weeks later, de Gaulle arrived in Algiers, and it was the biggest demonstration for a man, maybe biggest than the ones that he got in Paris. All Algiers was there, the Muslims and the French Algerian people too. Everybody was in the streets and screaming and chanting and singing the Marseillaise and so on. And de Gaulle was the big man on earth. Everybody thought that he was the savior. After all these years of no government, no policy, no nothings, he was the God on. And he goes to the famous balcony of the government general building and opened his arms and he said, "Je vous ai compris, I understand you." Maybe he had understand them, but they had not understand him at all.
Over the next 2 years, as the French Algerians listened to his broadcasts, de Gaulle too seemed to be dithering on the subject of independence, and they began to distrust him. And when a popular army commander was fired for criticizing the general, they went to the barricades, and soon the streets were resounding with the chant of Algérie Française and even de Gaulle to the gallows. The army knew that the people were rioting in support of a soldier. They looked on calmly and did very little. And soon after, another de Gaulle broadcast confirmed their worst fears.
C'est que tous les Algériens aient le moyen d'exprimer leur volonté par un suffrage vraiment universel. Jusqu'à l'année dernière, ils ne l'avaient jamais eu.
Once again, violence on the streets of strife. In tormented Algiers, Frenchman clashes with Frenchman as students and veterans riot in protest against de Gaulle's announcement of a plan to give Algeria its own choice between independence or continued association with France. In a shocking climax, the bus runs out of control, adding to the bitter toll.
If one army coup had brought de Gaulle to power, perhaps another could stop his betrayal of Algeria. And now this parachute commander would have to decide where his duty lay. To that misguided democracy in France, or to the army here.
Un jour, il y a un officier que je connaissais bien qui m'a dit le général Charles est arrivé à Alger. Le général Charles, c'était un général qui avait commandé toute l'Algérie. Il me reçoit dans une villa très discrète. Je comprends qu'il est là secrètement. Il me dit, écoutez, Saint-Marc, j'ai beaucoup travaillé avec vous, j'ai de l'estime pour vous. Moi, je vais déclencher une action de façon à ce que l'irréparable ne se produise pas, c'est-à-dire à ce que toutes ces populations à qui nous avons offert notre confiance ne soient pas abandonnées et que l'indépendance pure et simple, sans aucune garantie, ne soit pas décidée. Est-ce que vous êtes prêt à marcher avec moi? Vous avez 3 minutes pour me répondre. Ça a été une circonstance dramatique de ma vie. Et j'ai réfléchi, j'ai bien compris ce à quoi je m'engageais. J'ai bien compris que ma réponse pouvait me conduire peut-être au peloton d'exécution et peut-être à la prison. Alors je lui ai dit, oui, mon général, je marche avec vous.
one night, I received a call from Europe #1 in Paris, saying that something had happened in Algiers that night, tonight. What's going on? I said, well, I don't know, but anyway, I go in the street and take my car.
Et la nuit, nous sommes partis par plusieurs colonnes convergentes sur Alger, dont nous nous sommes rendus maîtres très rapidement, sans aucune bavure et sans une goutte de sang. Et pour moi, ça a été l'essentiel de mon action.
And then I saw civilian people coming out from that place, from that headquarters with arms, submachine guns, grenades, and pistols, and things like that. And I said, well, something wrong, really. They are well involved in Paris.
Mon grand souci était d'éviter tout affrontement sanglant avec les unités qui n'étaient pas prévenues de ce coup.
It's significant that the units left out of the plot were the conscripts. They'd soon be civilians again. The paratroops who took the city, including Alain Raymond's office, were the lifers, the professionals.
Curiously, a telephone call. I said, well, telephone, that's the ring from Paris. How can I get these guys out of the room? I told him, look, you know, I have left my girlfriend home, and she is calling me because I left home at 4 o'clock in the morning, usually not. Can you let me talk to her? He said, well, okay. That's the first time that I can get the story of the putsch out of Algiers.
He left you alone to talk to your girlfriend,
Yes.
who turned out to be Paris.
Yeah. That was the first news that they get from me. And the last one, too, for the next 4 days. The French Algerian people were thinking that they are going to be saved by the army. And the parachutists got all the girls they want in Algiers and so on.
But in Paris, a panicking government trundled old World War II Sherman tanks out of mothballs to protect the city. It looked ridiculous. But their fears were not unfounded.
In the forest of Orléans, 1,800 lightly armed paratroopers, loyal to the rebel generals, stood ready to move on Paris. Only their commander had already been arrested by the fast-moving Minister of the Interior. And so at dusk, when the local police came and told the soldiers it was time to go home, they rather sheepishly did so. Cracks were beginning to appear in the plan, but the turning point came when General de Gaulle went on television.
Françaises, Français, voyez où risque d'aller la France par rapport à ce qu'elle était en train de redevenir. Françaises, Français, aidez-moi.
De Gaulle's plea split the army. The draftees would not join the putsch. In many democracies, conscription is repugnant. But here, it was the draftees who saved democracy.
The draftees were not going to fight against France at all. They're where their family was. On the fourth day, the general was not showing on the balcony, some has gone already. When the putsch is over, it was finished.
The putsch had failed. It failed because the French people didn't want it and because the conscripts wouldn't support it. The French were through in Algeria. And some of the professional soldiers who had tried to stop Algerian independence would pay for thinking that they knew best.
Même avant l'Algérie, même avant l'Indochine, vous avez vécu des années épouvantables dans l'infâme camp de concentration de Buchenwald à cause de votre lutte dans la résistance française.
C'est ça, j'étais très jeune.
Donc vous saviez, mais vous connaissiez la prison et tout ça.
Oui.
Et puis maintenant?
J'ai été condamné à 10 ans de détention criminelle.
Oui.
Oui.
Par votre propre pays?
Par le tribunal d'exception d'ailleurs, dont la légalité a été longtemps discutée par les juristes, parce qu'à ce moment-là, le général de Gaulle avait les pleins pouvoirs, le fameux article 16. Moi, j'ai été condamné par un gouvernement de mon pays à 10 ans de détention criminelle, et j'en ai fait 6. Alors sur le plan matériel, c'était une prison beaucoup plus confortable que Buchenwald, qui était un camp de concentration particulièrement inhumain. Mais sur le plan moral, être prisonnier de ses propres compatriotes, ce n'est pas une partie de plaisir.
Vous avez des regrets?
Non, je ne regrette rien.
As the paratroopers returned to their barracks to be disbanded, they defiantly roared out the words of the French torch song, "I regret nothing." Élie Denois de Saint-Marc was flown off into captivity.
Soldat, on peut lui demander de mourir, c'est son métier, mais on ne peut pas lui demander de tricher, de mentir, de se parjurer et d'abandonner les gens qui ont été confiés à sa responsabilité.
Perhaps many of the rebel soldiers believed, as Saint-Marc still believes, that they had done their duty as soldiers. With the nation under fire, that duty seemed to be more important than their duty as citizens of a democracy. I flew on to a country that claims there is no division between the duties of a soldier and of a citizen. Before long, events would grievously and dramatically put that claim to the test.
So we've come to Israel, a state that in its 4 short decades of existence has been more or less at war all the time. And yet it calls itself a democracy, and it has enough of the aspects of a boisterous, rowdy, contentious democracy that one head of state here spoke of his job as being president over 3.5 million prime ministers.
But these are well-armed prime ministers. I saw more guns and uniforms here than in any other country. Half the population is always on duty or on call. Very few professionals among these soldiers. They're mostly draftees, citizen soldiers who, though I didn't know it yet, would soon be causing problems not anticipated by the founders of this citizen army.
The army is the people's army because the people is the army and the army is the people. There were many talks in the past. People said, would it be possible in Israel, like in all the Middle Eastern countries, that one general will order his 3 armored divisions to go on the capital? If there would be a stupid general, which I don't believe that there would be, or there was anyone, or there will be, who would dare to give such an order, all the soldiers will laugh at him.
This is a country whose very existence depends on its guns. And in 1967, those guns were used to enlarge its existence, occupying parts of Egypt and Jordan, Gaza, and the West Bank, the occupied territories that would change the map of Israel and transform the character of its democracy.
The youngsters now say, I met you in the war, and you have to say which one. You don't know. You look at him by the age, you know, whether it was in 48, 56, and 67, war of attrition, 73, Lebanese war, wherever it was. Because in 40 years, we've had wars galore. Now, you can't expect this to happen, and everybody says, and they lived happily ever after.
More than 500,000 Israeli citizens are intimately familiar with this.
The draft law takes both men and women at the age of 18, and men, until they're 55, are committed to the reserves, not just on call.
for a month every year until they're 49. They have to take up the gun again for training and maneuvers, or for war. I thought I'd better meet some of these citizen soldiers. Yoram Yair is one of them.
I'm living in Kibbutz Ramat Rachel. I have an English wife, 2 kids, a boy and a girl, aged 7 and 2. In the morning, a part of my job is going down to the market to bring fruits and vegetables to the shop that the kibbutz own for selling to the customers from the city.
Another member of these compulsory armed forces is Shimon Shalim. He runs a fast food joint in Tel Aviv.
I think that Israel is the best democracy in the world. You can make money here, and you can get rich here.
To help make that money, Shimon hires Arabs to slice the carrots and wash the floors. He says it's hard to find Jews who will do those jobs, that the Arabs work cheap. Dr. Zev Weiler lives in those occupied territories, but he works in Israel proper, in an intensive care unit.
Here in Israel, it's a reality that you have to prepare for war all the time. I feel that the first commitment is to the family, and my second commitment is to the army. In times of war, I think this commitment would change. I would leave my family behind and give myself completely to the army.
I can't say I'm going gladly, because I'm not. I know I'm not. But unfortunately, it became to be a part of our life.
When I go to the army, I close everything. I mean, I don't call to home, and I don't want to see nobody except my friend in the army. I don't want to see even my son or my wife. I don't want to hear nothing from the business. And maybe some guy's gonna say that I'm crazy. For me, it's a vacation. It's some fun.
Every year I find myself telling myself that it's the last jump, but after a few months I'm there again.
You think about being taken away from your home, and it's something that you have to compromise and do it if you want to keep living as a Jewish in Israel.
I jump around 50 times, and every time I score again.
Inside that aircraft there are 3 citizens waiting, perhaps not all that eagerly, for the parachute jump that will launch them into a grueling 72-hour non-stop exercise.
These are the last days of an annual month of training. They are training in case of war with a neighboring state. From time to time in the past, men showing up for their annual 30 days have in fact found themselves going off to war. 365 days a year, Israel has an armed force on the move, just in case.
We say we have a saying in the armies, You never stop time. You can't keep ticking all the time. So until Tuesday in the morning, everything will be finished, hopefully. It'll be 2 cold nights. The worst is to come, I think.
I was very scared.
How much longer are you going to keep this up?
I don't know.
What's the age limit for parachute jumping?
Yeah, well, it's 32.
32?
Yeah, in our unit.
I've seen some guys on this drop who look a lot more than 32.
Yeah, I know that I don't know what keep them here, but they stay here.
We are under a daily and constant threat from the 140 million Arabs surrounding us. And let's not forget the fact that the main goal is to push the Israelis literally into the sea.
In this citizen army, the uniforms are sloppy and eccentric. There are no regulation boots or brass buttons. Insignia are almost invisible. And the men call the officers Joe or Danny or Av. It's almost like a holiday camp, spiced with hard work and the threat of death. This camaraderie is part of the cement that holds Israel together. But there are two groups of citizens it does not touch: the ultra-Orthodox religious and the Arabs.
We are not applying the draft law in the military to the Arab Muslims. It is done to the Christians and to the Muslims on a voluntary basis. Because we realize that to put by law, to enforce them, every youngster, to serve in the army, will create a problem for him. He tomorrow will have to fight his cousin. There must be some sort of a conflict between these two loyalties.
Too many filth and rubbish is covered under the carpet of security.
Example?
Okay. Since the War of Independence, we went through few wars. The Yom Kippur, the 6 days, and others. All the young, brave, strong men were in the army. Who did all the services in this country, in the civil life? Bread and milk and water and taking away the garbage and everything. Who did the work? The Israeli Arabs. And what happened? Then you didn't have any security problem. When it starts to be a security problem, when you want to keep them separate, because basically we have still the mania of keeping the purity of our people. People wouldn't say that Arabs are second-rate human beings. They would say openly, they are different and we are different and we are the chosen people and this is the promised land, so it's our land. And the people who are refugees who came to this country and live with the trauma of the Holocaust, and this trauma is nourished very carefully by some of our politicians. If you remember Begin, when he said, we are the victim of the world and no one can tell us anything because everyone is to blame of what happened to us. And once you are a victim can do no wrong.
Israel, by the Declaration of Independence, is a Jewish state. That's the first point, that's the last point. Israel is a Jewish state. Talking about democracy in a Jewish state, it sounds to me as a contradiction.
Rafik Halabi, journalist, Druze Arab, and extraordinarily a major in the Israeli army, on his own teaches a class on democracy to Israeli high school students.
When the kids are coming inside the class, they used to say that Arabs are dirty, primitive, conservative, religious, terrorist, enemy. They know nothing about Arabs. They know nothing about their culture. They know nothing about their history. They know nothing about even how many Arabs are living inside Israel. They don't know it. One of every 6 Israelis inside Israel is an Arab. You can't talk about democracy only for Jews. You can't talk about coexistence when you rule 2.3 million Arabs without rights.
This is an Arab village in Israel proper, not the occupied territories. This man has lived here since before Israel existed. Like all Arab citizens of Israel, he has many rights. He can vote. His friends explained to me that they're eligible for civil service jobs. They get police protection. But their ID cards are coded to show that they're Arabs.
But the Arabs come third, is that it?
Third, yes.
When they apply for many services, playground facilities, say, or paving, or water, they may be told that those who have served in the army have priority, and they are not welcome in the army.
Obviously, there's compromise between ethnic groups, between religious groups, between various groups that make a society, make a democracy. No one group is trying to impose itself on the other, but trying to find a way to live together. Number one is the defense of the country. And this is where the issues of democracy sometimes come to a test.
This morning on the way to the hospital, I was stopped right at the entrance because an Arab tried to put a bomb inside a car right by the entrance of the hospital down here. So I just wonder whether these Arab neighbors and citizens with their own full rights are not taking advantage of our profound democratic means and our fanatic our fanatic trial to conserve their democratic rights.
I have some Arab friends. Well, sometimes they come and meet me in my house, and we sit in my house and we talk. They work in the kibbutz, most of them. Some of them are from the village nearby. And one of the nice things between us is we always speak freely to each other. We don't keep away things between us. We talk about politics, we talk about work. We almost talk about everything. The only thing he sees is all over the world, when there is Palestinians, they don't get any rights. They've been pushed down. They can be shot, killed, without any rights. So the only solution for them is to have their own country. Obviously, they're living now in the West Bank in Gaza, and they think that that's the proper place to have their country.
Yoram's friends are not Israeli citizens. They live under military rule on the occupied West Bank, where government subsidies are one way of attracting thousands of Jews to settle here to help establish Israel's claim to these lands. Dr. Zev Weiler is one of those settlers.
Other countries, first of all, do not see the West Bank as part of Israel. In Israel, we do have a democracy, but in the West Bank, as all the countries refer to it as occupied territories, we cannot have a complete democracy for the villagers because there is still a military rule over here. You might ask, what kind of a military rule do these villagers live under? I think it's quite a humane one.
Whether or not the occupation of the territories is humane is not at issue for the moment. They are firing real bullets at imaginary enemies from outside Israel. But for each, it is a different Israel. For one, a mission on an ancient sacred land. For another, a business opportunity. For a third, a troubled experiment in democracy. But they agree on their duty to defend it. For that, they put their bodies on the line. Israel's citizen soldiers have been trained to fight tough and determined armies in the field. This is a duty they do not question. In 1987 and 88, they were assigned to a different kind of duty.
The Gaza Strip looks like a war zone. To many Israelis, it is one. Armored personnel carriers are now a standard part of military hardware here. One hospital reported at least 39 Palestinians admitted with gunshot wounds.
But this was not war, this was an explosion of pent-up frustration from a hopeless, stateless people, whether guided from outside or not. Now the citizen soldiers were ordered to put down civilians, including kids, with whatever means, including rubber bullets, tear gas, beatings if necessary.
The defense minister, Yitzhak Rabin, flew in to make an inspection and gave Palestinians another forceful warning.
I hope that the people of the Gaza Strip will realize that the longer the disturbances will be continued, the greater there will be their suffering. This has to be understood by all of them.
But it was not understood by all of the soldiers. Was it their duty to beat up civilians? Now the army began to send in psychologists to deal with the troubled minds of soldiers who couldn't cope with this.
The West Bank today is under a military control, and you can't pretend that it can be a democracy under the military.
Yoram Yair even contemplated refusing to serve on the West Bank. But then he decided that this would mean abandoning people he's come to know and care for.
So it's like leaving the Arabs at the mercy of people that hate them. If I can be there to soften their approach to them, even if I feel bad about it, I should have been there.
But Dr. Weiler, who thinks the occupied territories should belong totally to Israel, is more comfortable with controlling the Arabs who live there.
I think that the Arabs in the West Bank should not receive a full democracy now. They might reach it after we have annexed the West Bank.
The solution will have to be a Palestinian country, even if we consider giving back the West Bank, although we're thinking that it belongs to us, or we have a right on this country, and it will be for the best of Israel and for the best of the Arabs.
The month is over. Zev and Yoram go back home, one hoping for peace and the other expecting trouble. The argument between them is going on all over Israel. The army is the people, and the people is the army. Their duty, both as soldiers and citizens, will include deciding whether the territories are a natural growth of Israel or a cancer eating at the flesh of her democracy. Unlike the professional soldiers who started the putsch in Algeria, unlike the professional soldiers in Argentina who thought they knew better than the citizens how to run the country, the soldiers of Israel are the citizens. And if anyone is going to make Israel's democracy work better, they are the ones who will have to do it.